Speaking of fixer-uppers, want to give you some tips today. There are still people out there that look to buy fixer-uppers for themselves in their own home. So most of our conversation is going to not really gear around investors, because investors buying a fixer-upper that are experienced are probably looking at this from a different angle. They're looking to renovate and resell the property or fix it up and rent it. But we're talking about consumers that want to buy a fixer-upper home for their own primary residence for them to live in. We want to give you some practical tips of things you can do if you're thinking about buying a fixer-upper property, things to look for and things to avoid. So what you need to do before buying a fixer-upper. I think the very first thing is getting pre-approved for a mortgage, right, David? I mean, that's, unless you're buying cash, that's always the first step.
For anything you're doing in real estate, if you're going to need a mortgage, that has to be your first step, especially now with multiple offers on properties. And what we're seeing is, sometimes we have clients that are not necessarily looking for a fixer-upper when we first speak, but then all of a sudden they find some homes and they're like, well, it needs this amount of work. So that's a whole different animal. It's a whole different type of mortgage.
Sometimes people will look for a fixer-upper because the move-in ready turnkey homes are flying off the shelf at prices and bidding wars, and they can't compete. So they say, okay, let me find a home with maybe a little bit of a black eye or the ugly stepchild on the street. Let's look at that one and look at the bad house on the street and see if we can pick that one up and then make it our own. And I think you also have to set aside an amount of money for your budget. You have to know what it's going to cost to fix up and renovate it.
Right, and like you said, I mean, we're not talking from the perspective of a normal investor that has a lot of experience doing this. I think a lot of people have watched a lot of shows on cable television about how easy it is to renovate a home, and I don't think it's necessarily
no, those TV shows, just like how they show you how easy it is for real estate agents, I wish that it was that way. But the reality is, in both scenarios, to cut it down to a 40-minute TV show, they cut out a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes. That's the rough part of either being an agent or fixing up a home.
Right. So here's what some people need to know. If you're thinking about potentially getting into a fixer-upper type situation, you have to know that in any home that you purchase, whether it's a fixer-upper or not, when the appraisal is done, they're going to look for any health or safety issues that could flag that particular home and make it an issue for the lending. So if there is anything, even if you don't necessarily think it's a fixer-upper, maybe it just it needs a little bit, a replacement of a roof or a little repair here or there, and that's something that probably has to be done beforehand. Or with Waterstone, we actually have a program that allows a lot of those repairs to be done after closing, which is a good thing.
We've talked about it.
We've talked about it a few times on the show. But overall, there are some renovation type loans that could be used for fixer-upper. So there's an FHA product, there's a conventional product, and it's one of those things where we're talking to the client ahead of time and getting your information, seeing which route is better for you. But there are ways that you can finance in those repairs into your loan, and that's really the only way if you're going to get a mortgage, if it's going to be a fixer-upper, to get it done, because no bank is going to lend on something that has all kinds of issues that
the other side of it is, so even if it doesn't have safety issues, let's say that it's sound and it's got a roof, but it needs a lot of upgrades. The escrow holdback can do that. But let's say they're thinking about doing it themselves. They want to get a normal mortgage on it, and then they've got their own budget, spending it in cash. You're going to be cautious of debt to income ratios and things like that. You got to be cautious about making sure that you have enough money to afford fixing it up. But you want to know what that budget is going in. So don't underestimate the importance of getting contractor bids on repair stuff, because they're going to find things that you might miss, and you're going to think that it's maybe cheaper than it is sometimes, or you might think it's more expensive. I also see it on both sides. I mean, I have people that come to us and say, oh, this house needs a new roof. That's going to cost $30,000. It's like, it's a 1,200 square foot house with shingles. It ain't going to cost, so people sometimes don't know how to put the real numbers on some of those construction or remodeling costs. And I think getting a contractor bid and budget up front to know exactly what you're getting into. And do you want to finance it? Do you want to pay it out of your own pocket? Knowing that ahead of time or through the due diligence process is really, really important. I think another thing that happens is, let's say that you find a fixer-upper home, and you have a desire to fix it up. You also have to be cautious to not over fix it up. In other words, you don't want to fix it up outside of the norm for the neighborhood. I mean, if you buy a home for $200,000 and you put $100,000 into it, that doesn't mean it's worth $300,000. So you have to understand that your cost to remodel or upgrade it aren't necessarily going to add value. I mean, putting on a new roof doesn't add the value of a new roof. People expect a home to have a good roof on it,
Right.
So
And a lot of the amenities that that people do to to upgrade things. I mean, just like you said. I mean, if you're putting $20,000 into your kitchen, $50,000 into your kitchen, that's not raising the price $50,000.
No, it's not. Now, are there scenarios where you can buy a home cheap enough to fix it up and have and increase the value by more than you spend on? Absolutely. But the norm is not the case. You have to be cautious about not over upgrading it for your neighborhood and then losing money. And a lot of people get into remodeling the home because they think it'll add value. I always tell people you want to get into remodeling the home to make it your own, to suit you, not necessarily for the purpose of adding value.
I couldn't agree more. It kind of goes back to our original conversation of, is it a long-term thing? And if so, you can do whatever you want. You're not going to lose money. I mean, historically speaking, you stay in this home long-term, it's going to be a good investment for you. But on anything short-term, especially if you're doing something that's maybe out of the ordinary, it's a toss-up.
And I think the other thing is that, so let's say you set aside 50, you buy it as a normal, it doesn't have a normal property, a normal conventional mortgage, it doesn't have any structure or damage that an appraiser will nix it or find things that a bank won't want a loan on, and you set aside $50,000 to remodel it. What happens if you run into a little financial hit? What happens if you lose your job? All those types of things when you're buying a fixer-upper and you're putting your own money into it have to be factored into whether or not it's a good financial decision for you based on your employment, your financial life. All those types of things come to play because you don't want someone to go out there and make the mistake of buying a home and then setting aside $50,000, which is all they've got to set aside, and then something happened to them, and then they don't get to fix up the home, and then they're miserable living there when they could have bought a home already turnkey, mostly fixed up, lived in it, and maybe not completely their own, but they'd have a little bit more sanity.
And that's the difference. And I think that's when we would have that conversation in the pre-approval process. Are you going to want to finance in these costs? And like we said, there are renovation type programs that can do that. Basically, what that means is you put the bid on the home along with the contractor's bid, and both of those items get sent to the appraiser. So the appraiser is going to appraise that home based on your after improved value. So that's why you're able to finance it all in. And it's a conversation to be had. Do you have the $50,000 in the bank that you're able to use, or is it something where it makes more sense to go down that path and get that different type of financing?